The strategic planning bundle is how emerging clinical teams finally move from uncertainty to clarity, confidence, and calm control. Built within fractional precision operations, it transforms planning into something predictable, structured, and deeply supportive. Because success isn't accidental, it is engineered with precision. Design, decide, deliver.
Let's talk about the high-stakes world of clinical trials. For all the brilliant science that goes into them, the biggest threat isn't always the molecule, it's the operations. Today, we're going to dig into how biotech firms can stop just hoping for success and actually start engineering it.
First, let's just start with this number because it's pretty staggering. A full 80% of clinical trials face delays. And here's the real kicker. These delays are almost never because the science failed. Nope, they're caused by operational problems, the real-world nuts and bolts of just running the study.
And this problem actually has a name, the feasibility gap. It's this massive, dangerous black hole between the brilliant strategy your team comes up with and what actually happens on the ground. For way too many companies, this gap is just filled with risky, expensive guesswork.
So this really boils down to two completely different ways to operate. On the left, you've got the old way, reactive guesswork. That's where you're basically a professional fighter fire, constantly dealing with crises. But on the right, there's a new way of thinking, proactive command, where you're actually in control, anticipating problems before they even happen.
And, this culture of guesswork, it's everywhere. It's trying to build a global strategy from a PDF that's already 6 months out of date. It's picking a multi-million-dollar clinical site just because, a guy there. It's trying to manage this incredibly complex startup process with a bunch of disconnected spreadsheets. It's organized chaos, and it is costing companies an absolute fortune.
All right, so how do we fix this? Well, the answer is a 3-step methodology that replaces all that guesswork with hard data. So let's dive into step 1, figuring out where in the world to even run your trial.
This is the first, most fundamental question every clinical operations team has to answer, right? Where on this planet can we get our study up and running the fastest and with the least amount of friction?
And this is where the shift really happens. We have to move away from just having static information. Like a report that says, Spain is a good option. That's not enough. We need to move to dynamic intelligence. That's the kind of insight that tells you, hey, whatever you do, don't submit your application in Spain in August because the entire regulatory agency goes on vacation. See the difference? One is a fact, the other is a strategy.
And this is how you can actually quantify that risk. Instead of some vague feeling, you get a hard number, a readiness score. So here you can see Australia scores a 92 while Italy is down at a 65. All of a sudden, a really complex and stressful decision becomes incredibly clear, and maybe more importantly, defensible.
So what you get out of a process like this is huge. You get that clear 0 to 100 score. You get a deep analysis across 22 major markets, real timelines you can actually plan against, and all this intelligence on things like seasonality, and this is crucial, the top risks you're going to face and how to actually deal with them.
The impact this has on your team's workflow is just immense. What used to take a team weeks of painful manual research, you can now get done in minutes. This gives you the confidence that your country's strategy is actually solid before you've spent a single dollar.
Okay, so you know where to go, but that's only half the battle, right? The next critical piece of the puzzle is knowing who to partner with. And that brings us to step 2, site feasibility.
So the question gets a lot more specific now. Out of all the hundreds of potential clinical sites out there, which ones are realistically going to deliver on enrolling patients for this very specific study?
Because, let's be honest, this is where things can go catastrophically wrong. This is the single biggest risk in the whole process, the dreaded zero enrolling site. It's a site that you pay to activate, they go through all the training, all the motions, and then they enroll exactly 0 patients. It is a total unmitigated disaster, and it happens way more than you'd think. So to avoid that nightmare, you have to bring some serious, objective discipline to the table. A system like this forces the issue by mathematically ranking your options. It makes you define what success actually looks like. Is it all about speed? Is it cost? Or is it expertise? And then it scores every single site against your priorities. The best option is no longer a gut feeling, it's a number.
What this does, and this is so important, is it rips out all of that subjective bias. A site doesn't get chosen because we like working with them. It's chosen because it scored an 8.5 on our key speed metrics.
It even lets you see the trade-offs, showing you that, hey, if you go for the cheapest site, you're probably going to take a hit on startup speed. And you know, the ultimate benefit here? This whole process creates a defensible audit trail. So when leadership comes knocking and asks why you chose this site over that one, you don't give them an opinion. You hand them a data-backed memo that completely justifies the decision. So, we know where to go and we know who to trust. The final step in all this is to master how to execute. So let's look at the third and final piece of this methodology, startup execution. We've all seen this movie before, right? You've got a great country strategy, you've selected these fantastic sites, and then the momentum just dies. It gets stuck in that last mile of startup, and the team is just stuck in a loop asking, okay, so what's next?
The solution is a clear, standardized path forward. It's about mapping that whole complex, messy startup journey into a simple 5-phase roadmap. From pre-activation all the way to getting the final green light to enroll patients, everyone on the team knows exactly what needs to happen and in what order. No more confusion.
Think of this as your project management shield. You've got a standardized 36-point checklist so nothing, and I mean nothing, gets missed. You have these visual risk badges that practically scream at you when there's a bottleneck, like a pending ethics approval, before it becomes a 3-week delay. It prevents those tiny administrative tasks from derailing your entire timeline.
The ripple effect here is just profound. When you approach a busy, high-performing clinical site and you're this organized, you have a clear, professional plan, you immediately stand out. You become their partner of choice, and that means you get their best people and their full attention over some other, more disorganized sponsor.
So when you put all 3 of these steps together, what's the ultimate outcome? It's a fundamental shift. You're moving from that state of reactive chaos to one of proactive command and control over your entire clinical trial.
Those 3 huge, fundamental operational questions are now answered with data, with clarity. You know where to go, you know who to trust, and you know precisely how to execute. The guesswork has been totally eliminated from the system.
Which really just leaves us with one final question for you to think about. In a world where we know that 80% of trials face these kinds of operational delays, is your trial simply hoping for success, or is it truly engineered for it right from day one?
The Strategic Planning Bundle is how emerging clinical teams finally move from uncertainty to clarity, confidence, and calm control. Built within Fractional precision operations, it transforms planning into something predictable, structured, and deeply supportive. Because success isn't accidental, it is engineered with precision. Design, decide, deliver